how certainty and character are destiny. So I'm going to give a few famous sayings that you may have heard of. The first is that whenever, and I've heard a couple of variations of this, but the first is that whenever two people come together in good faith, the one who is more certain influences to a greater degree the one who is less certain. Life is a competition of ideas, and it's not so much that the better idea wins. It's the individual that's more certain, that's more grounded, that has more confidence. Now, this is related to quality also, because ultimately it's hard to be really confident in something that doesn't make sense and isn't real. Like, some people are delusional, but eventually the world eventually the world kind of like shakes you out of that. Eventually you kind of learn like what is true and what is not true. So certainty is really the force that drives all achievement, all disruption, all paradigm shifts. Like Peter Thiel says, what do you believe that's true that other people think is not true? I mean, the most powerful thing in the world is to understand something disruptive that other people do not understand or believe. And that's been the change for, since the beginning of humankind. And that's what we try to do in our company. That's why our company is called Exponentials, because we're bringing together the fundamental disruption and change before it's time. Like, another famous saying is, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. So there's two famous corollaries that relate to the idea of certainty. And the first is that money, like people, flows to where it's best treated. That's kind of like saying the cream rises to the top. I mean, like attracts to like, and money is always going to go to the best idea, to the best value. Some people will say, you have the innovators and then you have the people that cash in on it, the copycats. And some people will say, well, Microsoft didn't have the best operating system. It's the best total value equation. It's not necessarily the best product. It's the best combination of product that has to be good enough. Like, they say your product has to be 10 times better than the existing one to disrupt it, because if it's just 2 times better, people will stay with the incumbent because of switching costs. But the total value proposition has to be better, meaning that, the combination of the product, the marketing, the product market fit, the timing. So if your product does have all those things as a total value proposition, then it will disrupt. And the second corollary of money, the famous one that relates to the principle of certainty, is that if you took all the money in the world and you distributed it evenly, it would quickly, or relatively quickly, flow back to where it was originally, or would redistribute, based upon the current dynamics at that time. So that's very controversial, because people don't like to believe that money is where it's supposed to be. They like to think that it's where it's not supposed to be. Now, I'm not a total proponent of this. I do think that if you distributed all the money equally, that some of it would flow back. I think that, government and other things can put in guardrails and other things. But I think over time, people adapt. So the people that have the greatest money consciousness, they adapt to whatever the circumstances are. It's kind of like why investors say we invest in the right teams rather than the right product, because the right product poorly executed is not worth anything. Like they say, ideas are a dime a dozen, but the right team knows how to win no matter what the product is. They'll just keep iterating and pivoting until they own the market. And it's kind of the same way with money, that people that have the money consciousness know how to make money. Like Grant Cardone recently, he did a show called Undercover Billionaire. I didn't watch it, but in the clips he says I believe he was successful. I didn't watch it, but he in 90 days he went from $100, where he didn't even have a place to stay, so to creating a company that's worth $1 million or more So it's like money is like an idea. It's like people that are rich and then they go bankrupt. If they maintain the money consciousness, then they can just recreate it. Because it's like if you know how to play the piano and your piano gets sold, it's not that you can forget how to learn the piano, but it's like you can get another piano. You're not dependent upon that piano. You're not dependent upon that $1 million for your riches. Success and riches is a mindset. It's not a bank account. It can be recreated. Like if you learn how to ride a bike and someone steals your bike, your ability to ride the bike is not based upon that bike. I mean, if it's a totally different type, but you could probably ride almost any bike. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about character and why character and certainty is both destiny, because it's easy to rise in life. It's not that easy, but it can be done. But what's even harder than rising in life, getting to the top, is staying on the top for multiple reasons. One is that people the more you have, the more people try to take what you have, and then you have to protect yourself legally. But it's also character as destiny. Some people do things to advance themselves, but it catches up with them in the long term. Because if you hurt another person, that person is always going to want to try to, rectify that. Because they feel hurt, they feel injured, they want to be made whole. So if you get to the top by being mean to other people, like they say that be careful how you treat people on the way up, because those are the same people that you'll treat on the way down. And I think that's why character is destiny. Like you can get to the top by being a really, malicious person to a certain degree. Actually, you'll probably get stopped even before you get to the top. But if you do make it to the top, society, life, everything else is going to want to take you down. And character is destiny. They say character, another famous definition of it, is doing the things that are right even when nobody's watching. And that's why they say money just makes you more of who you are. People say that money is corrosive, but character is destiny. And if you have a lot of money but you have good character, then you'll just use the money for good. I mean, there's a lot of people using money for good to help more and more and more people to make better and better products. So they say, just as a little bit of a side, like they say, if you really want to corrupt someone, give them power, and absolute power corrupts. I believe that even power is basically still part of destiny. Like some people use a lot of power for a lot of good. People that misuse their power, they were like little tyrants even when they didn't have anything. They were like, someday I'm going to have a lot of power. I'm going to settle this score. I'm going to settle that score. So a little bit more about certainty and character. Sometimes when these come together, they're labeled faith. That's why the Bible says faith can move mountains, because even the material universe is, I'm not sure if it's totally to a certain degree, but this is shown by physics and quantum physics, based upon our perspective. Like an atom or an electron or whatever it is, or a particle, it cannot, when it's really small, cannot be positioned until you actually observe it. So what your consciousness is, like what you see, how you perceive, determines the actual reality on the quantum level. And perhaps like as a build-up, things are not always reductionistic, but like the idea of commingling, the two things that are millions and possibly trillions of miles apart can affect each other. That's why love is eternal, because if you remember someone, you bring them into consciousness. It's like you activate it just by your feelings of love. That's why love is the transformative power. And there's another famous story, I believe it's in the Bible, of the cripple, and the healer came by, and everybody else, or I'm getting two stories mixed up, but commingling them, but I believe this one was particularly about the healing waters. Everyone's jumping into the healing waters, and the cripple, he was just waiting, and everyone said, "Oh, you're a cripple. Why don't you jump into the healing waters?" And he goes, "My faith is so strong, I can afford to wait. That let the people whose faith is weaker." And that's kind of like what certainty is. Certainty is kind of like you understand what, what your ultimate destiny is. And people whose faith that are weaker, that are doing all kinds of crazy things, you can just kind of let that play out. It doesn't mean that there's not a time to act. I mean, there's inspired action where you do need to act, because action is important. But there's also a period of waiting. It's like, people that try too hard, those people, like, don't convince other people because it's like they seem desperate, like the salesman mentality. People that are just very service-oriented and very character-oriented and very confident, that's why confidence can move mountains. That's why even people of the opposite sex are, attracted to you if you're very confident, not arrogant. Arrogant is like compensation where you don't really feel it, but you're just trying to, show it. So just a couple other ramifications of this. So, one example that you have conviction and that you have confidence and that also you have character is that you're excited by life. I was listening yesterday to a famous idea, a podcast, which says that you only have fear if your circumstances are bigger than your reality. That is so powerful. If you just said that every day and reminded yourself every day, your whole life would change. If you really let it sink in, you only have fear because your circumstances are bigger than your vision, than your story. That's why people that have the same story all the time tend not to grow. And you see them 10 years later and they still have the same story. If your vision is bigger than your circumstances, then you can always be happy. You can always be content. You can always be optimistic because, like even Elie Wiesel, that's why Simon Sinek says, if your why is powerful enough, you can survive anyhow. He didn't say that exactly. I believe someone else did, but Simon Sinek talks about the power of why. If you understand why you're doing something, you can accomplish pretty much anything. And kind of the last idea, unless another one occurs to me that I want to talk about in this realm, is I wrote 18 books published, and they're very well reviewed, and I think like real contributions to humanity, and it gives me so much gratification to see people's lives being transformed by them. One of the chapters in one of the books is called "The Top Half Manages Down and the Bottom Half Manages Up." It's actually, I think, the reverse, the order of it. The bottom half manages up and the top half manages down. I forget which one comes first in the title. But anyway, so, we live in a world of accountability, but it's accountability to make ourselves better. Like the real competition is not with other people, it's with ourselves. That's why we have these interactions in life. Like we basically have soul families and soul destinies, if you believe in that, where we're in this life to make each other better, not bitter, as Joyce Meyer says. And the top half manages up. The bottom half manages up because they want to hold people accountable so that they don't misuse their power. That's why, like when you're famous, like more people are scrutinizing you. The news covers you, because with greater power comes greater responsibility. So that's good. It's good that people that have a lot of power have a lot of scrutiny. Like if you're president of the United States, they're always scrutinizing you. Which is good because the president can do a lot of damage, and they could probably do more damage if they're not scrutinized. And then, the corollary is also true that the top half manages down because a lot of times people, and this is part of character is destiny. Like they say your attitude determines your altitude. If you have bad attitudes, if you're selfish, if you're mean, if you're lazy, you're probably not going to get that far in life. So, that's why bosses have to hold people accountable. It's like you have to show up and do your job. Now, bosses can be predatory, and that's going to be a knock against them because, like I said, character is destiny. But there's also legitimate power, legitimate roles, like, judges, police. And again, anything can be misused or abused. But if God put you in that role, you're supposed to use it with, true integrity and true character. So a boss is legitimately supposed to, correct in positive ways, their employees so that the employees do better performance, so that the company does better, so that they have better attitudes, so that they're focused on the customer. Like Amazon, they have an empty chair in meetings. A lot of companies, they think it's just about them and their product, and they get in love with their own mind. Like people get in love with their own mind and they think how smart they are. When you get in love with yourself in an egotistical way, that's when you just start to outsmart yourself. Like when you think you're smarter than other people. And companies that think, we'll just build this product, like Steve Jobs famously did, but he bought products that he really believed people would love. If you just build a product, but you really are out of touch with the market, then you can spend like the Segway. I think was a brilliant product, but people didn't want it. I don't know how many millions of dollars they lost. But the idea is that the top half manages up, down, and the bottom half manages up. Think about certainty and character, because if you have certainty in character, that's your destiny.